Today I'm joined by someone whose voice might sound very familiar to you. From co-hosting national radio shows to hosting red carpets for MTV, Maz Compton is an award-winning media personality, author, speaker and podcast host. But behind the on-air energy and celebrity interviews, Maz found herself navigating a secret chapter, one that eventually led her to reassess her relationship with alcohol and completely transform her life. In this conversation, Maz opens up about her career in the spotlight, the tipping points that led to her sobriety, and what she's learned about herself and society since giving up drinking over a decade ago. We dive into the cultural pressures around alcohol in Australia, how sobriety shaped her health, work, and identity, and why she believes being sober is the most empowering choice she's ever made. Whether you're sober curious, questioning your current drinking habits and the role alcohol plays in your life, or looking for an inspiring story of personal growth, this episode is for you. Let's get into it. Maz, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so excited to have you. We've been trying to have this conversation for a long time.
Yes, and I am probably to blame for pushing it back a few times because there's just been a bit on, but here we are.
That's all right. Life is busy for everyone. So anyone listening is probably going to be already thinking, I know that voice. I know that name. You're pretty well known in Australia, but tell us who you are.
That is a great question. I can list all of the things that I do really well, and then people might just be able to make an assessment on who I am. So I think firstly and foremostly, people would know me as a media personality or presenter. Way back in 2004, I got a job on MTV as one of their TV hosts, and I did that for a really long time. And then I kind of switched into radio, and I've been in the radio landscape for a really long time now. So currently I'm a breakfast radio announcer for Triple M. But aside from media, I am a mum. I have a 6-year-old. I have a husband who's a builder. We're renovating a house, which we've been doing for a very long time together. And I'm a real lover of the outdoors, and I'm a huge book nerd. I read every night.
Okay, what kind of genres of books are we into?
Okay, well, currently I'm reading Jeremy Renner's biography. So he's a world famous actor who had a really crazy accident and he actually did die. And the story is about how he died and came back to life. So it's a harrowing but like a really insightful book. But usually it's murder mysteries. If I'm being honest, it's like the Thursday Murder Club, and Benjamin Stevenson, who's a great Australian murder mystery author as well, is probably they're two of my favorite sort of series that I'm into. But yeah, every night. And that's only a new thing. So earlier, probably in January this year, I decided I was just a little bit over going on my phone as a default at night. And I go to bed pretty early, but I would get into bed, just check Instagram, have a bit of a cheeky scroll. And then 20, 30 minutes later, you're like, oh gosh, nothing I've read has made me feel any better. It's not going to help me sleep any better. So I thought, what if I just read a book instead of scrolling? And I just started my 13th book this year.
So good.
Which is, I just love it so much. So I've turned into like a proper book nerd now.
Yeah. Oh, I've just come back from holiday, and one of my daughters particularly is an absolute book fiend. Like, her absolute favorite thing to do is read.
Yeah.
Sometimes even we were in California, and sometimes she was like, nah, I'm just chilling in the room reading my book.
It's so good.
Yeah. There's nothing like a great book, but then you get sad near the end, don't you? Because you don't want the book to end.
Yeah, but then you just get another book.
That's true. Sometimes I can't because I have to grieve about that book for a little while because I'm so sad. Anyway, okay, well, you've clearly had a really full and cool life, but one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about today is how you've become really a bit of a voice in Australia around sobriety and what that means. And I'd love if you would share a little bit of your story and why you ended up as that voice.
Yeah, so one of the things I didn't mention is that I am a real advocate for sobriety. And so what happened is I kind of just started living my life and drinking booze, and it was no real big deal when when I was a young adult. So as I mentioned before, I got a job on MTV. One of the parts of my job was to go out and party with people. It just was. So whether it was celebrities or it was red carpets or events or whatever, part of the job was like go and have a good time. And whenever you walk into a room where Kelly Rowland is hosting an event, somebody gives you a champagne and then somebody else tops it up, and before you know it, you've had a few glasses of wine or champagne or whatever, and you've got a bit of a buzz on. And that was my honest day-to-day life for a really long time in my young adult years, and I didn't see any issue with it at all, because everybody that I was around at that point in my life was doing the same thing. We were all young, we were having fun, it was part of the job. And we used to make this joke at MTV that the pay was terrible, but at least the booze was free. And so we would just drink our wages, you know? So I did that for many years, and then I sort of switched gears a bit. I jumped out of TV and I jumped into radio, and I found myself really in the same predicament where all of a sudden there were these sales things that I needed to go to, and you would walk into a room at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and there were just drinks being handed around. And so, of course, it's rude if you don't accept the drink if it's being offered to you. And again, I never thought it was an issue until I kind of hit my 30s and I was still working in radio, but it wasn't so much about the events. It had turned into walk through the front door, undo my bra strap, kick off my high heels, get a glass of wine. And that became a real daily mantra for me. And I noticed that anything in my life, whether it was a good day or a terrible day, or I'd had an argument with a friend, or I'd made a new friend, or someone had died, or somebody had had a baby or a wedding or whatever, every single event in my life had alcohol attached to it. There wasn't one thing, if I looked at my diary like a month out, everything in my diary had alcohol attached or associated with it. And so then I started to feel stuck because I was living my life out loud. I had this great job in radio. I'm still interviewing celebrities. I'm still getting invited to things, but I couldn't do it without drinking. And so when I started to feel stuck, and I was stuck for a few years, I just sort of pushed all of those feelings aside because I didn't actually, and I know this now, have the tools to deal with all of those emotions and feelings. And my one multi-tool of coping was booze. Every single time, if I started to feel anxious, I would have a drink. If I started to feel sad, I would have a drink. If I was extremely happy, I would have a drink. And so it became less about the events and more about my emotional well-being. And I was maintaining it through alcohol, regardless of how I was feeling.
And can I ask, how were you feeling the next morning?
Terrible.
Right.
Like every day, waking up feeling awful, so hungover. And then I had this kind of routine where I'd like get a couple of Baroccas and have some sparkling water that would take the edge off. And then you'd have a greasy bit of breakfast and then you'd get on with the day. And I honestly think I learned how to just manage the hangovers because they were so regular. It just became a part of normal life. Like I would dread waking up because I knew I would feel rubbish. I would think about the night before and wonder, what did I say? Did I embarrass myself? And so that hangxiety is the term that they kind of use now for it, where you're hungover and feeling anxious about what you did the night before. That was a really regular thing for me. And so it all really came to a head in 2014. So in 2014, I've got my dream radio job. I was doing the National Drive show with my co-host Dan. We'd worked 7 years together as a team to try and get to this point in our careers. And that when you've got that national presence and that big radio show, you're on everything. We got flown to Dubai. I had to fly back from an event in Perth to Sydney to interview Robbie Williams one day. Like it was, you're on a plane every 2 weeks. You're out at events. You're meeting Pharrell Williams. You're introducing Katy Perry. You know, like it was all happening.
So it was a dream job.
It was a dream job, but on the outside a dream, on the inside chaos in Maz Compton's life because nothing was computing. So everything happening to me externally was great, but inside I was so miserable. I had imposter syndrome. I was so anxious. I felt so much pressure. And I think at the time I really wasn't able to enjoy or celebrate what a win that was in my career because I was so messed up on the inside. So during that year, I asked myself this a couple of times. I was like, what would it be like if I stopped drinking? because I just didn't want to do it anymore. Like I just got to a point where I'm like, I was bored of it and I didn't want to do it anymore, but I didn't know what else to do.
And Maz, were other people commenting on your drinking?
Not so much because, as I mentioned, I felt like everyone around me, we were all in this kind of boat together. So no one was calling out each other's behavior because we were all kind of behaving in the same way. I just think that I was probably reflecting on it a little bit more and feeling super uncomfortable about my behavior and the fact that I was drinking all of the time and I wanted to do something differently. So this was probably months and months during that year where I kept thinking, what would happen if I stopped drinking? And then I would go, oh my God, that sounds impossible. Or that sounds really scary. Or I would probably lose my job. Or people would think I'm an idiot and I'd lose all of my friends. Or I just had all of these negative responses to that thinking. But then in September of that year, a really good friend of mine, my manager at the time, suddenly died of a heart attack. And it just threw me down a road I'd never really been down called grief. And it was a really terrible, terrible time for me. And it was in sort of those really dark moments that I reached out for counseling, and with a counselor decided that maybe I should stop drinking. Like maybe this is a good idea. And it wasn't that it was this light bulb moment that a therapist gave me. I came up with the idea, but it's because I started to listen to myself. And my narrative was, I don't want to drink anymore. I'm really done with this. I can't do this anymore. This is not going well for me. And it's not like my life was a disaster. My life was amazing. But like I said, internally, so much conflict. So that really got me to the point of going, okay, let's just be serious and take some time off and see what happens in a month. It was just a month. Like, let's just do January 2015. Let's start the new year. Let's not drink alcohol for 4 weeks and see how I feel. And if I like that version of me better than the one that I'm not really loving right now. And I honestly have not had a drink since then.
Wow.
So 10 years.
And was it hard?
That is such an interesting question because now it feels so easy. But if I put myself, like transport myself back 10 years, and I had a history of drinking almost every day for most of my adult life, and then one day you stop drinking, yeah, it's hard. The first 3 days are pretty easy because most people, I think, you get really excited and it's like a new shiny toy, like the novelty of sobriety where you go, I'm not drinking. Or maybe you don't tell anyone, but internally you tell yourself, I'm not drinking anymore. I'm doing really well. And then on day like 4, 5, and 6, it's really crap. It's really hard. Your body's detoxing. You don't feel great yet, but then the great comes. And so for me, that was about 3 weeks in, day 21, day 22. I remember waking up and it was really matrixy. Like I woke up and the trees looked greener and the birds were singing louder and the sunlight shot into my window and hit me in the face. And I just felt like I was seeing the world through different eyes. And I realized that that was clarity. And I think after the 3 weeks, alcohol had finally, and probably for the first time in my adult life, completely detoxed out of my system. And my baseline just increased naturally. And so my capacity got greater and so many benefits started to come through after that sort of first 3 weeks of navigating not drinking.
And did you have any horrible side effects like nausea or dizziness or the shakes or anything like that?
Not really. Like I had worse symptoms when I stopped drinking coffee, which I only did about 18 months ago. That was worse. I didn't really have any physical effects. One thing that I will say that I wasn't expecting was I got really tired. So I think when I was drinking, I was probably running on like alcohol, also ethanol, caffeine, and adrenaline. That was like my kind of, cocktail of life. And I think when you take those 3 things out of your system, I just felt like my body needed rest a lot. So I really felt like I got really tired. So I slept. And it sounds really lame, but I feel like I caught up with my sleep and my circadian rhythm, probably got back into a better flow. And then I started listening to my body more. So there weren't any dramatic side effects that I felt that were negative other than being tired. And then another thing that happened that I wasn't expecting is my sugar cravings went through the roof. So I was always the girl, like, I would never have a dessert. If we're out for dinner and you go, do you want to look at the dessert menu? I go, no, I'm just going to have a nice glass of red. That was my dessert, glass of red wine. And I'd done that for, 20 years nearly. or not quite 20. And so when I stopped drinking, I didn't realize this, but I was consuming so much sugar from that wine that my body was like, "Where's the sugar?" And I became a sugar monster. So I would just eat a Maxi Bon after dinner. And because I think when I stopped drinking, I didn't do this thing that I've heard so many women who have reached out to me. This is what they do. They go, "I'm going to quit drinking. I'm going to stop having sugar. I'm going to cut carbs. I'm going to run 10Ks a day." And they try and do like 5,000 things at once, and then they fail at all of them. And that's not their fault. You just can't sustain any of that. So I gave myself a break, and I was like, "You know what, babe? Just have the damn sugar for now and deal with that one when you're ready to deal with that one, because that is going to be better." I knew that was better for my brain than the alcohol. So if I was going to pick a vice at the point in my life, then the sugar was going to win. So that was one thing. I didn't expect how intense that sugar craving came. Every late afternoon, it was like a real monster. So I just had to feed that little monster for a while, and then we've weaned that monster off now as well.
So you talked about that you were using alcohol as a bit of a crutch
Yeah.
to overcome anxiety and overcome imposter syndrome in work. So what happened at work whenever the alcohol was gone?
Yeah, so the alcohol was never gone. That was the trick, right? Like, so when you're using a substance to cope with emotions, you just go and find it wherever. So if I didn't find it at work, I'd just go home and I drive through the bottle shop, drive through,
Oh, sorry.
and I
I
would.
mean, when you stopped,
Oh, sorry.
how was it at work then
Sorry.
once the alcohol was gone?
Oh, so I understand what you're saying. So once I stopped drinking and I was still working in radio, I did a lot of just deep dive questioning of myself. And in that month, I learned a lot about myself. And so instead of drinking away those feelings, I actually just started like processing my emotions, which sounds really scary, but the alcohol had suppressed those emotions. The alcohol had dampened those feelings and numbed me out. And what happened when I stopped drinking, I did feel lots more emotions, but I felt like I had a capacity to process them, talk about them. I went to therapy and I started actually dealing with some of those feelings. And what I figured out pretty quickly, which I didn't realize about myself, which is pretty funny, I always thought I was an extrovert because I've got a bit of a personality. I've always worked in media. I love being on a stage in front of a crowd. But then this weird thing would happen when I was going to an event. I would always feel really, really uncomfortable. So I would have a glass of wine before I even got out the door just to like dissipate those feelings. And what I've realized since I stopped drinking is I'm actually an introvert with an extroverted personality. And so the way that I reset and regroup and relax is alone and not around people, because people drain me. And my husband's the opposite. He is an extroverted extrovert. He loves being around people. He loves being social. He gets his energy from being around other people. And I thought that that was me for most of my life. I thought that's what I needed. I need to be around people because they're going to refuel my fire. They're going to help me, get what I need. And what I've realized is that was completely taxing me. And so I think I learned all of this over a few months. So it was just a big learning curve. I finally was learning about myself, and it's stuff that I had, instead of trying to learn, I just pushed aside and away. So the drinks were still there. I just wasn't having them. So the biggest change is that I just made a choice, right? So instead of activating, let's just drink because these feelings don't feel great, I activated, we're not drinking because I know how to process my emotions now. So the switch was just me. And it is actually a very simple switch.
Very, very deep though, and a lot
Very
of
deep.
people will understandably
Yeah.
try and avoid it because of
Yeah,
course you have to sit with feelings that feel really uncomfortable.
It's hard, and we don't like feeling uncomfortable, and that's okay, but you just have to sit with yourself. That was what it was. It was a big look, a long, hard look in the mirror, and a long, hard look going like, who are you without alcohol? And maybe you will be a better version of yourself without it. So let's just try and explore who she is. So I didn't just go on a mission to like stop drinking. It was more about discovering who I was without alcohol. And I think they're two very different headspaces to go into sobriety with. I think if all you're trying to do is stop drinking, The novelty will wear off. You will stop drinking for a period of time and then you'll go, great, I nailed it. And then you go back to drinking. Whereas if you're on an exploration or like a discovery of self, that's endless. So my journey of discovery of Maz Compton without alcohol is 10 years down the track and still going. And I'm not bored of that yet. The novelty hasn't worn off because I'm still discovering stuff about me.
And how did your work colleagues respond?
Terribly at first. So, like I said, that core group of people that I was carrying on with were all doing the same thing as me. And so when I didn't really announce it. I just quietly told a few people, I was like, hey, I'm just not drinking right now. And it was like, what's wrong with you?
Are you pregnant?
Why are you being so boring? Are you pregnant? One person said, come and talk to me when you're drinking again. Because like basically the friendship's on hold until that happened. So they were really hurtful things, but also I had expected that. And I also was like, I'm not going to let this change I was so headstrong and heartstrong in my decision. So I didn't have a great response. I didn't really have anyone support me other than the two people that I told leading into my sobriety, which was my boyfriend at the time, who's now my husband, Glenn. I remember I called him. So we were in a long distance relationship at the time that I decided to go sober. I rang, so I was in Melbourne and he was in Sydney, and I rang and I was like, hi. And we'd only just started dating. And I was like, I have something to tell you. And I said, and after I say this, like, I completely understand if you want to just push pause on our relationship or move on or whatever. And he was just like, what is it? And I was like, I think I have a drinking problem and I'm going to take some time away from alcohol. And he was like, oh, is that all? I'm like, yeah, this is a big deal. And he was like, well, what do you need from me? Like, best response ever. What do you need from me? I'm like, I just need you to like not drink around me for a little bit and just to see how I go. And he's like, cool. From when? I'm like, January 1. And he's like, great, done. Like it was so supportive and beautiful. Hence why I married him. And then I rang my mom and I told my mom. And she was so shocked because she was like, what are you talking about? She's like, you don't have a drinking problem. I was like, yeah, I do, mum. I'm like, and I haven't been honest with you about my drinking behavior and how severe it's gotten. And so let me paint you a picture. This is where it's at and I want it to change. And so again, she said, how can I support you? And I said, when I come over, just don't open a bottle of wine and we'll go from there. And so knowing that I had those two kind of sober support people have my back from early on in the journey, I didn't feel like I needed any of my friends or colleagues to understand what I was embarking on at the time, and I just sort of let them have their opinions and just sort of like really lent into those two relationships that were nurturing my sobriety.
Maz, you're incredible. I think the level of insight that you had into what was going on is actually phenomenal, to be honest. I think it's quite unusual.
Yeah, I've had a lot of time to think about this. I've written a book about it. I've done podcasts about it, and I love talking about it. And I really think all it is I got to a point in my life that so many people get to where you're just fed up with your choices. And I couldn't figure out. I was like, I'm a really smart person. I'm really savvy. I don't want to do something and I keep doing it. Like, what is that? And I think we all struggle with this in different areas of our life. I think the drinking issue for me was the one that really brought it to a head, where I was like, what is the disconnect in my brain? Why can't I marry these two things together? Why do I feel like I have to keep drinking in order to like get through life instead of making a different choice? And it really, when you're at that point, I think it becomes simple because then you just have to make the decision, and it's one choice at a time, right? So the choice was from January 1, 2015, regardless of what happens, if I win the lottery, if my best friend dies, if I don't know, like if I get another dream job or an opportunity, or if something awful happens, or if I have an accident, like whatever happens today, I'm not drinking alcohol. And that's it every day. And it's been like, I don't even think about it now. But in the beginning, it was like really conscious decision. And I don't think it's about willpower either. I just think it's about allowing yourself to be true to what you really want. And if you really want to stop drinking, then just stop drinking. I know it sounds really easy when I say it like that, and I know how difficult it is, but when you simplify it like that, you take all the pressure off. It actually does become we are the sum total of all of our choices, and we only have a set number of days here. And I just want to make great choices as often as I can. And I think that's a really easy way to live life than the trap that we hold ourselves in constantly when we think that we can't do things when really we can if we choose to.
Yeah, absolutely. I've so many thoughts in my head here. I think one of the things is that we live in Australia and alcohol is just so much of the culture here. And it is funny because I'm from Northern Ireland and I often have Australians say to me, "Oh, well, you're from Ireland and you must love to drink and blah, blah, blah." And I'm not a big drinker and I never have been. But I always find that really funny because I see alcohol way more part of life, everyday life in Australia than it
Mm.
ever was in Northern Ireland, actually. So,
Interesting.
like, I'll give you an example. If you went to a kids' game of sport in Northern Ireland, it would be unheard of to see parents on the sidelines having a drink. But
Right.
I've been to sports games here where, the clubhouse is open and everyone's drinking. So I think it
Yeah,
is very ingrained
it
in
is.
Australian society.
Mm.
And also, as you said, like people think that you're boring or why can't you just relax or why are you being so uptight? And I know even in my group of friends, there's been occasions where people have been doing try July or
Yeah.
try January or whatever. And other people have kind of comment, oh, stop being so boring. And it's like this constant messaging.
Mm.
And then I think the other thing is, I was even thinking of my 16-year-old daughter. We'd just been on holiday and, she was kind of like looking at the cocktail lists and she was saying, "Oh, I can't wait until I'm 18." And we were in the US and I said, "Well, you'd have to be 21 anyway." So,
Yeah, true.
but isn't it
Yeah.
interesting because I think that that's as a society how we're really set up.
Yeah.
It's like to get to this age, to get to the legal age of
Yeah.
drinking. Whenever you were a teen, was that something that was in your friendship group? Was it
Absolutely. It was binge drinking at 15, 16 was very normal where I grew up, and I definitely participated in that, and I highly regret it these days. But yeah, it was just a no-brainer and a rite of passage. But what the reason why I love having these conversations is I really hope, so I have a 6-year-old son. I hope by the time he's a teenager that we've been managed to, that we are able to turn this ferry around, because currently, this is what happens. If you go to a bar with a group of friends and you are not drinking, someone will say to you, "What is wrong?" And I hope that we're able to turn this all around so that in the future, when we're socializing with our friends and one person is drinking heavily, that we all go, "Hey, mate, you're having a bit to drink. What's wrong?" Because that's actually the right way round. The people that are drinking are usually the people that have pain points that they're trying to dissipate, and they're doing it through substance abuse. They don't realize it. They might just say, "It's just one. I'm just being social. My mate got married, whatever happened, whatever." But I do think people use alcohol as that multi tool of coping because they don't know how to process and manage their emotional health. So if we can get people to process their emotions a little bit better and look after their emotional health, they might not need that alcoholic drink. So I hope that the tide is going to turn where this next generation of kids that are coming through are going to see alcohol for what it really is and not lie to themselves about what they think it should be in their lives. And that, yeah, the person who's drinking is the person that gets asked, "Hey, do you want to have a chat? Because there's clearly something up with you because you're the person that needs to have alcohol right now." And I think we're getting there. Like, when you look at the data, the younger generation, so the kids who are turning 18, 19, and 20 now are drinking less than what we ever did. So, and one of the heaviest demographics of drinkers in Australia are women in their late 40s and early 50s, which is terrifying, but that is the fact. So I think that we are going to be able to turn it around. That's my hope anyway. And that's why I'm so passionate about having these conversations. I think our generation's not a lost cause, but it's harder to get somebody to be sober when they've been drinking for so long. We can start having the conversation with our young ones to hopefully get them to a point where they never become dependent on a substance.
Yeah, the younger generation are amazing. They've so embraced sort of healthiness.
Yeah.
They know so much more about healthy eating and, water intake and going to the
Yeah.
gym and being fit than we ever knew. I
Which
mean,
is great. And, information is, knowledge is power. So all of that is so good. I also think there's this undertone of with so parents who say are in their 50s and 60s, if they're heavy drinkers, I think that their kids would look at their parents' behavior and go, "Well, I don't wanna do that." It's like we were all on Facebook and then our parents got on Facebook, so then we went to Instagram, right? Like, you just don't wanna be doing what your parents do. It's just a generational thing, and I think because the heaviest drinkers are in their 40s and 50s, that those people's children will just naturally be going, "Well, I'm not gonna be doing that because that's what mum and dad did, and I don't wanna binge drink with my girlfriends and be, and have a few wines under my belt for the school pickup. I don't wanna do that for my family." So there's that element of society that I think is gonna shift as well.
yeah. As someone who went straight from pregnant to menopausal very quickly, my skin really, really deteriorated quite rapidly. Now, I'd always had a sensitive skin, but my barrier function deteriorated and I developed really very obvious rosacea. And this is something that I see day after day in my clinic also. So many of you reached out and asked what I recommend and why. I have to say that since I opened my clinic, I've been using a brand called Rationale. They're an Australian brand that have been around for about 30 years. And what I absolutely love about Rationale is the products. They feel very luxurious, but they're extremely scientifically derived. And they've got these ingredients called skin identical formulations. All the ingredients, the minerals, the vitamins, everything that's included, the proteins, the lipids have all been found naturally within the human body and therefore they're recognized by the body. So the ingredients are really, really well received. I find that menopausal skins and perimenopausal skins are dry, irritated, and sensitive. And with this range, I'm able to create a bespoke skincare plan for my patients. If you're interested in getting some of these amazing products, head to rationale.com and use the code YOU at checkout to receive some exciting bonus samples with your order. Whenever you mentioned women in their 40s and 50s, obviously that's a group that I work very, very closely with. And there's been some really interesting recent research that's come out saying that, obviously women drink for a multitude of reasons. They might be in an unhealthy, unhappy relationship. They might be completely stressed out at work. They might be stressed out with their kids for whatever reason. Culturally, it's what they've grown up with.
Mm.
But we also know that there's a significant group of women who are actually drinking alcohol to try and get to sleep at night because they can't get to sleep because of their perimenopausal or menopausal symptoms,
Yeah.
who are drinking because their confidence is in their boots,
Yeah.
that they're drinking because they're feeling anxious when they've never felt anxious before.
Yep.
And so it's very, very interesting to also step back and have a look and say how much of the menopausal transition is impacting this drinking within this group of women. And we also know that that age group are also a group who are using illicit drugs a lot more than they did before. And
Mm.
again, being able to get to sleep seems to be a really big reason why women are using drugs because they can't sleep or they're anxious or they're struggling with work. So I think it's just really interesting how all of these conversations, of course, are always interwoven.
Of
And we have
course.
to sort of
Yeah.
step back and go, okay, well, what are all the things at play here?
Mm.
And I also think it's really interesting is there's a couple of really very high profile doctors in that kind of menopause space. So female doctors who've all really stepped up and said, I'm not drinking anymore.
Yeah.
I've looked at the data and actually I've realized that as a menopausal woman, actually I just can't process alcohol. The science tells you that you can't process alcohol
Yeah.
in any way of the same way. It has a lot more detrimental health effects than it did when you were younger. And so I think we're having much more of a conversation. If I think even back to 5 or 10 years ago when you did this, you were definitely a little bit like you were ahead of your time Whereas, but now, we've
Yeah.
got like 1 year no beer, like we've got
Yeah.
all these groups where, have really become quite high profile. There's one, Hello Sundays.
Hello Sunday morning.
Yeah, Hello
Yeah.
Sunday morning. My patients will often come and tell me, "Oh, look, I'm really my drinking's out of control. I found this group on Facebook,"
Yeah. There's
and so
so
the
much.
sources of help
Yeah.
have changed because, of course, it used to be Alcoholics Anonymous. A meeting in a hidden room somewhere that no one was going to admit they were going to. So
Yeah.
it is quite incredible how things are being talked about generally so much more, from healthy eating and, exercise and water drinking to
Mm.
people being really open and honest and sharing their stories. So I think you've done an incredible um, thing by your books and everything you've done. But I think you're kind of been a bit ahead of the curve, I think.
A trailblazer,
I
some
think
might
yeah,
say.
I think you have been on
Yeah.
it. Like, I mean that with the great sincerity,
Thank you.
because you know I've definitely seen people popping up in the last sort of 18 months to 2 years with this, but you were definitely onto
It was
something.
a while. Well, and I remember when I was kind of, after my friend died and I was like, okay, I'm spiraling and I'm drinking too much and like what a way to deal with grief. Drinking is just not the greatest way to deal with grief at all. And I remember I Googled, am I an alcoholic? Don't do that. And I read like a bit of the AA manifesto and I got so annoyed because I was like, I'm not an alcoholic. I was like, I'm not. That doesn't resonate with me. But then I don't know what I am because I'm definitely not sober and I'm definitely not coping and I am drinking too much and I don't know how to stop and I'm stuck in this thing and I want to change my behavior, but I don't know. And I keep wanting to change my behavior and I can't. And then I do for a day and then I relapse. And I was just so conflicted and I was so frustrated because I was hoping that that label would fix me. I'm like, well, if I can say I'm an alcoholic, then that is my problem. And then I can fix that problem. But it wasn't that simple. And this is one of the reasons why I wrote my book called Last Drinks, because I was like, I wish I had that book when I was coming to the decision because it would have made it so much easier. There was no one around me that was sober. Sobriety was just not even. It was an insane choice that I made at the time, and it felt impossible. I felt like this is impossible, but I have to try. And I think like this might resonate with some people where I got to this place. It wasn't rock bottom. I don't like to kind of think of it as a rock bottom because I always think we are resourceful enough that if we find a rock bottom, we can dig ourselves deeper. Like we are humans. So it was more of this place where I was like, okay, I'm drinking a lot. I'm drinking a lot of alcohol. And the idea of quitting drinking is really scary to me because I don't know who I am without it. Like my whole identity is wrapped up in this thing. And if I drop that, what happens to me? That scares me. But what scares me more is if I keep going down this path and keep drinking and keep spiraling. And so that was kind of that line in the sand moment where I was like, okay, it's going to be scarier to keep going than to face the impossible thing that I think I need to face. So then I faced the impossible thing. And that was, again, a difficult but a simple decision. Like hard decisions are not, they're sometimes really simple. They're hard to make, but they are simple to make in that sense where you just decide, okay, well then let's put a plan into place.
What was it about the label of alcoholic that you felt didn't match who you were?
Yeah, so when I read it with the AA manifesto, they kind of label it as like a disease that I'm powerless under. And I was like, I don't feel like it's a disease for me. I didn't feel like it was like a hereditary thing. I hadn't grown up around alcoholic parents, and I didn't feel like I was at that quote unquote rock bottom stage that we all see in movies. So I think my view on what alcoholism or alcohol used to sort of look like was probably tarnished anyway. So it was probably more just that it didn't line up with my perception. And so when I was reading it, I was like, that's definitely a thing that I'm sure can resonate with people, but it is not, that does not feel like my story. My story is really, really different to that. And so then I was able to kind of figure out what my story was and then come up with a plan on how do we do this thing? And so for me, it was, let's do 30 days without alcohol and see how we go.
If someone's listening right now and they're knowing in their heart that they drink wine every night and that they feel like they can't do it without wine, or they think they can't do it without wine, but they also perceive that someone with an alcohol problem is a homeless person.
Yeah.
I think, what would you say to that person who's thinking, well, I'm
I'm
not
not
on the
that bad.
streets. Yeah, I'm not on
Yeah.
the street.
Yeah, that's a really great question. So, because I did it too, I was like, well, my thing was, and I write this in my book. I'm like, in my head, like people who had drinking issues were homeless and they didn't have any shoes, and I was like, well, I literally had a cupboard full of shoes, so I was fine, right? But I think you have to stop looking outwards at everyone else and their drinking and what it looks like to you, and stop labeling what everyone else looks like, and actually just turn the focus inwards and look in the mirror. And it's not about everyone else's drinking problem or whether or not they do have one. It's about you. And if you know that you're uncomfortable, I instead of saying problem, I like using the word uncomfortable, because if you're uncomfortable with your drinking behavior, that's when it's an open door for you to make a change, right? So I talk about this relationship with alcohol. And one of the things that I discuss in my book is how I figured out that I was uncomfortable with my relationship with alcohol, because I kept doing exactly that. I kept going, okay, I'm drinking every afternoon, but like, I'm not like that. I'm not that bad. So what I did is I actually wrote a letter to myself pretty much. And I wrote about my relationship with alcohol and I gave it a name. And so then I started writing. So Jerry is my friend. So I hang out with Jerry every afternoon, even though I don't want to. Every time I hang out with Jerry, I wake up feeling like utter crap. Every time I'm with Jerry, I feel like I get reckless. I don't remember parts of the night. I make stupid decisions. I wake up feeling anxious. I feel like whenever I hang out with Jerry, my face gets puffy, my skin gets bad, and so I'm writing about this relationship with alcohol. And when I was reading it back to myself, I'm like, this is an abusive, toxic relationship, right? And if this was an actual person, if this was a human being that I was hanging out with, anyone who loved me would go, get as far away from that person as you possibly can, because that person is destructive. There's zero benefits in that relationship. So you need to get away from it. And that made it easier too, because I was like, I've been in an abusive relationship for all of my adult life with this thing. It's time to let it go. And that made it a lot easier to come to having a big break. And so that's a really great exercise for anyone who's feeling, as you just mentioned, who might know, hey, I think there's something going on with my drinking, but it's not as bad as Sally in accounts. You can, if you do that exercise and actually turn it into a person and then tell yourself the story of your relationship with that person, it makes it much easier to work out whether or not you still want to hang out with that person.
I want to talk about another feeling that a lot of patients have described to me over the years, and that is guilt.
Oh, yeah.
Waking up feeling guilty. I have a number of women I'm working with at the minute who drink very heavily every evening. They start with a glass of wine as soon as they walk through the door, and then they drink their whole way through dinner, sometimes two, three bottles of wine. But then they get up really early the next morning and they feel so guilty about what they've done. Well, two of them run a lot. I don't
Mm,
actually know how they manage to do it.
yeah.
The other one I'm thinking of, she absolutely goes and punishes herself, not with one workout per day, but two.
Mm.
So she does this massive morning workout and then another one again later in the afternoon. And then we go back to the whole cycle again. And there's just this endless cycle of drinking, feeling guilty, self flagellation with exercise in this situation,
Yeah.
and then going round and round in circles. Do you feel that guilt was a very central feeling to what you were going through?
Mine was more shame. Like I called mine the blame shame cycle that I was kind of trapped in for a really long time. But to what you're saying, like that definitely sounds to me like there are some real issues with self-compassion, self-worth and self-love. And I think like we could just start there, and I think if you're drinking that heavily, if you're drinking heavily at all, Heck, if you're drinking at all, it's some kind of form of self-abuse in a way. And I say that not lightly, but there are zero benefits from drinking alcohol. If you just want to talk about this in a scientific and a medical perspective, zero benefits in alcohol and can increase your chances of 11 types of cancer. That's from having one drink occasionally. One drink. So this is water, but then let's say there was another glass here and it had vodka in it and you had a choice. So you can have the water or you can have the vodka, but the vodka is going to increase your chance of 11 types of cancer. I know what drink I'm having, right? So once we know this information about alcohol and we still continue to do it, then we're self-medicating and then we're kind of self-abusing. And I think that that comes down to not having any self-compassion. And then as far as running it off and it being, like I said, the blame, shame, or that guilt cycle, that's just trying to undo all of the bad, but it's doing more damage. So what what would be, and it's hard when you're in that cycle to step off, but what would be easier is to just not drink anything at all and then not have to go for a run the next day out of guilt and just have a sleep. Like sleep is your like best defense ever. Once we have enough sleep, we can start making better choices. We won't need to kind of, if you've got enough sleep, you're not exhausted, you've got more capacity. You might not even feel like that drink if your kids are driving you mad at the end of the day because you've got sleep under your belt, capacity, coping. And so I think when we're so depleted of all, it's multifaceted, right? When we're so depleted of everything, our capacity is low and we freaking hate ourselves, and then we drink and then we hate ourselves more. So we run to feel better, but then we hate ourselves more. It's this spiral that is never ending. And at some point you just have to like I've said before, just step off the treadmill. Like, if you're running on a treadmill, you can just stop the treadmill and step off the treadmill and stop. But you are in control of that. So that cycle is only up to that person to change because they're the only ones that are in control of it, you know?
Well, isn't it interesting though? Because so many women will come in to see me and we'll have conversations frequently about taking HRT, hormone replacement therapy,
Yeah.
menopausal hormone therapy. And a lot of women remain very frightened because of a potential connection between HRT and breast cancer, which has largely been completely debunked. But, that reputation still unfortunately clings on. But the same women who will be afraid to take menopausal hormone therapy, which my certain reading of the science is that it really has very little or no connection at all to cancer, will be the same women who will be drinking
Yeah.
a bottle of wine every
Which
night,
increases your,
has a
yeah,
dramatically, and it's
it's
like,
40%.
yeah, and it's like, hold on, this is crazy.
Yeah.
You're over here worried about something with an unproven and highly unlikely risk.
Yeah.
But over here, this real thing. But societally, it's actually much more acceptable for you to drink a bottle of wine.
Yeah.
And a number of people will tell you, "Oh, don't take HRT. That's really dangerous."
Yeah.
And so it's like, how as a society have we got to the
I
point
know.
where we've done a great job of getting people to stop smoking,
Yeah.
and there's massive labels all over cigarettes, and they have to be behind little hidden counters in the shops, and they're not
Yeah.
allowed to be promoted. But yeah, alcohol is still absolutely a massive national pastime, and really, I think on the whole, people don't know actually the risks. I think people are very shocked when I tell them the connection
Mm.
between drinking and breast cancer and drinking and bowel cancer. Like, they're like, "Oh, I'd never heard that before." And
Yeah.
so it's kind of really bizarre that there just doesn't seem to be, whether it's a political or whether it's a societal desire for people to not want to drink.
I definitely think the alcohol industry is the next one that's going to be under reform. It's like how this is what tobacco did 20 odd years ago when the labels came out. And yes, now everything's hidden away, but it is also big business, right? So that is something that we've got to come up against because we have these big companies that sell alcohol and they put it now in pink bottles. It's called pink washing. And it's all about getting women to drink more alcohol. And they don't care about your health. They don't care about your breast cancer risk. They just care about making money. So there's that has to come from, there are amazing organizations like FAIR that are doing research and development to try and, I think, lobby and get this on national agendas and in front of politicians for them to make the big decisions, right? That, I feel, is almost out of our hands when we're talking about women who are coming into your clinic or friends of mine or friends of friends. And I think what we're really, really good at, and this is coming back to the person that is like scared of HRT because they might have heard a thing once but they're happy to drink a bottle of wine every night, is we just want to believe what we want to believe and we want to justify our behavior no matter how insane it is. So that is just us doubling down on something that we are too afraid to let go of. And so the questions that I would be asking is like, okay, you might be scared of HRT. Let's talk about alcohol for a second. Like, why are you so scared why aren't you scared enough to stop when these are the facts and this is the science, that these are the papers that I can show you from the World Health Organization that say it's an A1 carcinogen in humans. Do you know what that means? It can cause cancer, like proven, factual, scientific, like it's out there. That is, we know that information. So why aren't you scared of this thing, but you're scared of something? You know what I mean? So I think it's about changing the questions that we're asking people as well. Because for me, like, I didn't get to that point of going, okay, I'm going to give this thing away for a month or 2 or 3 or however long it is, just to see what I look like without it. I didn't get to that point without asking myself so many deep questions. I didn't have someone really to go through it with. I just had to go through it by myself. And it was about finding the best version of me. And so these women aren't being the best versions of themselves, and then we feel bad about that. And I think instead of feeling bad about it, I just decided to do something about it and I took action. And so I think maybe we've just got to get more savvy on the questions that we're asking people to get them to arrive at that kind of line in the sand moment where it's like, because you can't tell someone to stop drinking.
Yeah.
You can't control anyone else's choices. You can help, you can assist, you can offer, you can hold space for, but at the end of the day, if that person wants to drink every day, they are going to drink every day. And I think I've had to really um, accept that too. There's been people that I've tried to help who've reached out for help that are still drinking today, and it's because they want to keep drinking, because for whatever reason it is, we can convince ourselves into the most insane existences because we believe it. And so these people just want to believe that they can't get off that treadmill. But like I said, you can. There's an off button. You can just take a step to the right and get off the treadmill. But it's terrifying, and I get it. So I didn't really answer your question, but
No, my other question is, at any point, have you ever considered or have people tried to talk you into having, oh, well, would you not just have one glass of champagne for your brother's wedding or your whatever?
I got that a lot when I very first stopped. People were like, just have one, just have one. I was like, no, I'm just having none. And just before I tell you the moment that I nearly had a drink, um, the mental gymnastics that you have to do to moderate exhausted me. So leading up to me becoming sober, I'd taken months off here and there. I'd done dry July quite successfully in the past. But what I found when I was moderating is I'd be like, okay, so on Friday night, I'm going to have 2 drinks and then I'll be able to drive home if I make sure I have a water after. So I'll do that. Then Saturday morning, I've got a brunch on. So I won't have a Bellini. I'll make sure that I just have this. And then I'll be able to have an espresso martini. I just have one of those. The amount of brain power I was using and energy I was using to just get through a weekend of moderating my alcohol consumption was insanity. And now it's really easy because someone goes, hey, do you want a drink? And I go, no, thanks. How are the kids? Like, it's so easy. So yeah, early on, I definitely got asked a lot, will you have one? When are you going to get back on the wagon or off the wagon or whatever it is? And I was like, I don't know. I'm just going to keep going. And then my husband and I, or my partner at the time, and I got married. We eloped, went to Bali. And it was our wedding day, and there was no one there that we knew, which was great. It was the best day ever. We didn't have to deal with any family drama. It was just the two of us. And we got married, and Glenn said, and we had this like amazing 3-course seafood dinner. Like, it was just in our villa. It was just like magic. and he was like, "Hey, like we just got married. Do you want to celebrate with a glass of champagne?" And I was like, "Ooh,
And
that's it."
how long was this from when you stopped drinking?
Probably 2.5 years, I
Okay.
think, or maybe coming up to 3 years because it was January. So it's probably 3 years because we got married in January, and I quit in January. So yeah, probably 3 years. And I thought about it, and I looked at the because there was champagne there. I looked at the champagne, and then I just went, "No, I'm good," because I just realized then, like, alcohol isn't going to make this any better. Because this is a dream day. This is golden. Like, we just got married. Here we are in our wedding attire in this beautiful villa next to a pool having prawns. Like, could it get any better? And I knew that a champagne was not going to make it better. So I was like, no, I'm good. Like, I'm really good. And then he was like, do you think that you've, like, had your last drink kind of forever? Like, yeah, maybe. I don't know. We'll see how we go. Like, ask me again in 6 months. I don't know. But I think by that point, I'd really just done so much work on myself. And back to what I was kind of talking about with some of your ladies that come in, the self-compassion thing for me was huge, right? Like, I didn't realize before I stopped drinking that I had a real self-worth problem and a self-image problem. And I did not think of myself very well or very fondly. So one thing that I did, which was another really good thing that I can recommend, is every day of that first month, I actually just wrote in a diary, just a journal, just journaled. And some days I would journal pages, other days it would be a sentence, other days I wouldn't want to journal, and then I would write about the fact that I didn't want to journal, but I'd committed to it. And there were some angry days in there, like it just was whatever it was. And then sort of a few months down the track, I actually went back and I reread that journal, and I was like, oh, she's so broken. And I just like, it's like I read the story of this broken hearted girl trying to like get love from all of these other places and then realizing that it was always within me, but I never knew it. And so that's when I talk about the self-compassion. And that's when self-compassion kicked in. And I was like, oh, babe, you've been doing it tough. Like, this is all to myself. You know, it's how you talk to a friend. But I was like, I haven't been a good friend to myself. I hadn't been kind to myself. I hadn't loved myself or let me be loved. And so when I kicked into self-compassion mode and realized what that was, I had so much compassion for what I had been through, what I had faced, what I was up against. And it just became a whole different conversation and had nothing to do with alcohol in the end. Like, I really think quitting drinking is actually not about the booze. It's actually about us as people and trying to connect with our deepest, truest selves and loving her or him. And when we can do that, then you don't need other things because you can emotionally regulate eventually and you do have a bigger capacity and you are nicer and calmer and your skin looks better. You know, like there's some vanity benefits too, for sure.
And if someone were to come to Maz and Glenn's for dinner, um, do you have alcohol in your house or?
No. Well, Glenn doesn't drink either, so there's no alcohol in our house, and there hasn't been for 10 years. If you came to our house for dinner, we would put you to work. So we like to make pasta from scratch. And so we would get you, like Glenn would make the pasta dough and then we'd get you to like roll it through the pasta maker. And then we just get people involved at our house for dinner. So yeah, we have dinner parties, not dinner parties. We have friends over for dinner all the time. All of our friends know that we don't drink. Some might bring a bottle of wine that they share with their partner, which I have zero issue with. But we just have a soda stream and lots of kombucha that's on tap at our place.
Yeah, I had to get a sparkling water tap at my house because I couldn't stop drinking sparkling water.
I looked at that and it's not within our budget just yet.
It's my husband was like, these glasses of water are working out very expensively, but somehow I decided that it was a really good idea.
Well, good.
Okay, and do you feel that it has changed the friendships that you've had, or do you feel that you attract different friendships than you might have?
Yeah, I mean, there was a period of time where, so I was working in radio when I first stopped drinking. And then just interesting, at the beginning of that year, I was talking to this girl who worked on our team about my sobriety. And I was about 3 or 4 months in, and she's like, what would make you want to start drinking again? And at the time, I was like, well, if I lost my job, because this is my dream job. I was doing the Sydney Breakfast Show with my co-host Dan. It was like I was talking to the microphone that I listened to Wendy Harmer talking to when I was a kid. Like I full circle, dream job. And so I was like, yeah, if I lost this job, like that would probably send me back to the bottle because that would be devastating. It's my whole identity. I've been working for like more than 10 years to get here. And then you wouldn't believe it, but in October that year, I lost my job. And it wasn't because we did anything silly. It was just because sometimes radio executives decide that they just want to take the radio station in a different direction. So we got told that we were no longer doing the breakfast show. And I remember I was very angry and very sad that day. And I was like, I remember talking about this only 6 months ago, saying that this would be the moment that would send me back to drinking. And I was like, I know that's not going to change my situation because alcohol never does. And I was like, and alcohol, if I had a drink, I'm not getting my job back. I'm not, it's like there's zero, zero, zero benefits. So yeah, it was interesting that I called that exact moment and then it manifested and then I got through it pretty much, I think, with a breeze, like it wasn't even by that time of the first year into sobriety, I just wasn't even just it kind of just drops off the radar as something to do.
And so what came next for you whenever you got over the devastation of losing the breakfast show?
Yeah, I did a that was a big identity crisis actually because my whole identity had been radio and MTV and this kind of person in media and all of a sudden I didn't have a media job. And I didn't have any alcohol to drink my sorrows, so I just had to get on with it. So I went to therapy, which I can highly recommend. That really, really helped me figure out who I was outside of radio. And then I just went down the whole fitness path. I opened a gym and I just went down that road. And now I've like pivoted back into radio hilariously. And I think like I feel like I'm the best I've ever been on air because I'm the most grounded and I'm the most me I've ever been because I kind of embrace all of me now because there's not parts of me that I'm hiding or trying to suppress or trying to necessarily fix. We're always trying to learn, obviously, but I feel like I show up as my whole authentic. I know that word is such a buzzword, but I really do truly feel like I bring all of me to the show. And I've never really had the capacity to do that in the past. So, and that's only getting stronger and stronger for me. So, a lot of therapy is the short answer.
Yeah. I mean, it's allowed you to be authentic and really get your true story that, people resonate with truth and honesty. I
Mm.
mean, if you think about it, like Brené Brown, Mel Robbins,
Yes.
Glennon Doyle, all of them have had an alcohol issue that
Yeah.
they've had to deal with.
Yeah.
All of them have worked with sobriety.
Yeah.
And yet they are women that certainly I'm very drawn to. I enjoy what they have to say
Mm.
in so many facets of life. So I think it's a much more common issue than people think it is.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
for most people it's hidden. So if you someone listening today who is sober curious
Mm.
or kind of thinking what that might look like, do you have any good resources or any tips or tricks or ideas?
Yeah, there's so many resources now, which is great because when I stopped drinking, there was zero resources. So I've written a book called Last Drinks. It goes into a bit more detail on my story and the moment I decided to stop and how I did that, and it has a 30-day kind of like kickstart plan. So if that's something that you're looking to do, yeah, I would definitely recommend getting my book called Last Drinks. But there are so many books out there by so many great authors on how you can overcome alcohol. You just have to just have a Google search and maybe just read the backs of things because not every book is for every person. So read the back, and if that seems like a voice that you resonate with, then that might be the book for you. There's online courses. We mentioned Hello Sunday Morning. That's a fantastic resource for people. I did an audio series called Booze Break with my friend Lindy Cohen, which is sort of like a podcast basically on how to stop drinking, and it details a bit of my story and a bit of her story as well. So there's tons and tons of resources, but at the end of the day, you could read every quit lit book on the shelf. You could listen to every podcast episode about sobriety. At the end of the day, you still have to make the decision to quit drinking, and that's a tough choice. So there's support out there. There are resources, there's flyers, there's pamphlets, there's websites, there's courses, there's so many things. And I encourage you to do all of them. but you still have to make that call, right? Like you still have to be the person that decides that was my last drink. I'm now going to go on a journey of self-discovery without alcohol and see how that looks and feels and commit to that. And that's a very hard choice, but it is a very simple choice.
What do you think the biggest thing that you've gained by not drinking is?
Oh my God. Great hair. Um oh, there's a lot, but probably I think I just feel like I know myself, and that's like a quote, know thyself. I just know who I am and what I'm capable of and what I'm not capable of. And so with that comes this ability to be able to say no so I don't get burnt out, and to be able to say yes to the things that I want in my life. And I have curated an amazing life because I don't drink alcohol. And that's the only reason. Like I was smart, savvy, and curious before I stopped drinking. I was just making stupid choices. Now I just make really, really great choices. I think that's it. It's my ability to make really great choices. And I've had people who say to me like, "Oh my God, I'm so jealous of you." I'm like, "Look at your amazing life." I'm like, "Mate, I've worked my butt off for this life. Like I choose to be a present mom. I choose to do everything that I do is so calculated and chosen because I want a great life, because I've got the space to do it now. And with alcohol, you just don't even have the brain power to even consider making great choices, because all you're thinking about is your next drink or how you can make yourself feel better for having your last one.
And was it a challenge at all for you to not fall into the risk of replacing one bad habit with another?
Well, yeah, when I stopped, remember I talked about my sugar cravings going through the roof, but no, and I've heard people say like, well, we're only human, we all need a vice. And I'm like, do we though? Like I don't see kids having vices. I mean, we give them devices, but that's our fault because we're the adults giving them the devices. So that's on us. But I just don't believe that. I don't think I have an unhealthy relationship with anything in my life right now. So I don't over exercise. I don't overread. I don't overdo
Is there
anything.
such a thing as overreading?
I reckon I could go close to overeating, but I don't have, I feel like I have been able to put down really healthy boundaries on almost every sort of facet of my life. And I don't have a single vice. And that is a really great way to live, because I'm not constantly worried about, am I drinking too much coffee? I gave up coffee a year and a half ago. Didn't think that was possible. Have done it. Feel great. And I did it because for health reasons, it was impacting my sleep and it was having some really bad effects on a whole fertility journey that I was on. And so I was like, well, I can try and go without that and see if that improves chances and health things. And it did. So again, like I don't have a vice, and I actually just don't believe that that's a thing. I think everyone's capable of not living with a vice.
So what's next for you?
There's no next. This is my favorite question to answer. I don't have a next because I spent so much of my life doing the next and it was exhausting. I'm just here now and this is it. This is where I'm at. This is what I'm doing. And I've made conscious decisions to just put myself in rooms with people that I want to have conversations with, and to not be in rooms that I don't want to have conversations with people in. And so I'm very calculated about where I am and what I'm doing, but I'm only ever right now in the present moment. And there's no next for me. It's just I'm doing my job, I'm loving my kid, I'm going for bike rides, I'm reading my books. Like that's my next is just what is immediately around me. And that is so freeing to not have a to-do list 1,000 pages long of things that I feel like I need to achieve in my life at the moment. Like I'm just really content, and I've just loved that feeling.
You're just loving life.
I'm loving this moment.
That's so good. I think you're absolutely right. And I'm as guilty as this as the next person, always thinking about what's next or what do we have to do next. And I also have, you know, patients in my life who will tell me I'll be happy when.
When?
I'll be happy when I've done all my exams. I'll be happy when
Oh,
interest rates go down. I'll be happy when I get the promotion. I'll be happy when my kids are sleeping through the night. And it's like this happiness thing is just some kind of thing far on the horizon that you're never going to get to.
yeah.
And I think it perhaps is why a lot of people right now are not feeling very happy.
Yeah, well, it's a choice. Like you can choose to be happy right now, or you can choose to look externally. Like I think a lot of this conversation has been about like there's all these external factors that we like to blame for our choices, but we're the ones making the choices. We're the ones not embracing current moments and or like prolonging things that will bring us joy, like giving up drinking for a while, right? And so I think we've got to really internalize those questions and stop pointing the finger at everyone else and looking at us and going, okay, what choices can I make? And that gives you power. That's empowerment. That's the definition of it, is like taking that control without being a control freak about it. That was a balance that I had to figure out too, because I've always been very controlling. And now I'm not.
My final question is the one I ask all of my guests, which is
Mm.
what would you say to 20-year-old Matt?
Oh,
You could chat with her.
this is such a big question. I almost want to give you two responses.
Go on
So,
then. We'll let you have an A and a B.
okay, so what I would say to 20-year-old Maz is everything's going to be okay, but it's going to get a lot worse. And that's because, like, in my 20s, life was so easy. And I'm in my 40s now, and it's really, really hard. And, like, I turned 40 and I had the 3 of the worst years of my life back to back to back. Like, it was my dad died, my best friend died, I had 2 miscarriages. Like, I lost my job back to back to back to back. Trauma, grief, all of the things. And so to 20-year-old Maz, I'd be like, hey, you're going to be fine. Like, your issue right now with a broken nail feels really important, but
Buckle up.
it's going to be okay, but it's going to get real messy, real bad, but you've got the capacity to get through it. That's what I tell her, because I did manage to, and I'm still going through I'm still in grief counseling, but I've managed to do all of those things and show up to those things 100% present, 100% broken, but 100% sober. And I think my ability to navigate like 3 really rough years is only due to the fact that I don't drink alcohol and that I have a clear head and I have and I think just a quest to want to get better and feel better and process and move forward, right? So those 3 years, which I've just come off the back of, were the worst. And I didn't even see that coming in my 30s. I thought I got divorced when I was 30. So I was like, well, surely it can't get worse than that, but it does. And this is the other thing, we don't know what our life is going to be. And so to 20-year-old Maz, it will be okay, but it's going to be really tough. And I think that that's I don't want to say that it's all roses, because it absolutely hasn't been, and it might not be down the path, which is, I think, again, why I'm so like just locked into right now, because I know how awful it's been and I know right now it's okay. So like sit in the okayness of this moment. I think that's really grounded me to like being just present and not worrying about the next thing, because the next thing might be awful too, right? Like, without being negative, but the next thing could be another disaster. We don't know that it's going to be a great thing. So just sitting with the now, and now is great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I love that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. You
That's
have been amazing. I've got about 500 more questions that I'd love to ask you.
Well, I can come back.
That would be amazing. Thank you so much. And we're going to put lots of resources in the show notes. So if anyone
Yeah.
wants to listen to your podcast, get a link to your book, we'll have that all there for anyone listening.
Yeah. And if anyone wants to, you can follow me on Instagram. I'm Maz Compton on Instagram. If you want to send me a message, I respond to anyone that sends me a message about drinking, and I can kind of point you in the right direction. Or I'm always happy to have a little chat with people if they just need some advice, because it is the number one thing I'm so passionate about. If we can get less people to drink less alcohol, the world's going to be a better place.
I know. I think one of the things that's really hard for people listening is sometimes it's not them with the alcohol issue. Sometimes it's their loved one. And as you and
That's
I've
always
already
tough.
talked about, that's
Yeah.
really, really hard because until that person decides themselves, you can shout at them, you know, guilt them, do all the things you want to do, but until they decide they're going to do it,
They've got to make the decision. Yeah.
and that's really, really hard. And I say that as someone who's a control freak. You like to
Yeah.
control
Yeah.
situations, but you can't control someone.
No, you can't.
Thank you so much.
That's okay.
This podcast and any information, advice, opinions, or statements within it do not constitute medical, healthcare, or other professional advice. Information is provided for educational and entertainment purposes only. If you have any health concerns, always consult your doctor.